I'm Amos Elroy, and I welcome you to the first episode of Progressive Update. I'm launching this new podcast in the hopes of providing information that is usually not covered very well with the mainstream media. And I hope to do that in a fun, kind of lighthearted manner at times. We have a lot of issues to cover that are just basically not being seen by the general public, and they're of tremendous importance. From global climate change impacting news to animal rights to income disparity and so on. So, some of you may recognize me from the Progressive Weekly Review on Uphill Media's channel on YouTube, and I welcome you as well. I decided to create this additional podcast as a way to expand on some of the things in a more luxurious manner, so you can listen to it at your leisure. I very much recommend anyone who hasn't seen Uphill Media channel content to head on to YouTube and do so. They have been in the scene since the primaries of 2016, basically 2015. And John Ellis has produced previously Bernie 2016 TV, and that has become then Uphill Media. It's a very progressive and very honest and sincere resource. So I highly recommend that you tune in there as well. I'd like to ask you if you like the content of this show or want to communicate with us, to tweet online and use the hashtag progressive update. So again, if you wish to communicate with me and provide any input or questions for future shows, or you just want to highlight something that we've discussed, you're welcome to share with the hashtag progressive update. All right. So now let me focus on something that has been reported by Oxfam recently. Oxfam is an international organization that deals with various things, from providing farmers in impoverished countries with livestock and so forth to labor rights and so on. And they have investigated the poultry industry in the United States and gone to factories such as the ones by Tyson and by Purdue. They've interviewed workers. Of course, they've not revealed their sources, but they've produced quite a damning report. And the allegations were that workers are granted very little time to do their business. I'm referring to bodily functions. And the problem is that the poultry industry has seen a huge boost. Currently, 8 billion, that's billion with a B, chicken being eaten every year in the United States. And this is a trend that has been going on in other places as well. But the demand for chicken has kind of squeezed the industry and provided a lot of hardship on the workers that are currently employed on these production lines. So basically, employees have been told in some instances to wear diapers. They are given very limited opportunities to go to the bathroom. There's a quote here that says supervisors mock the workers' needs and ignore the requests. They threaten punishment of firing, and workers wait ordinarily long times. That means an hour or more. Then race to accomplish their task within a certain time frame. Again, that's given us 10 minutes, or risk discipline. So that's kind of like quite harsh, if you can imagine working in these conditions And it's not a very appetizing picture when you think of where your chicken is coming from. There's been also a case in Alabama where a supervisor has told his employees, go to the bathroom and from there go to human resources. So, threats against employees if they would not abide, they would risk losing their job. Those kind of uh, violations are quite significant. Tyson has since claimed that they're changing their work policies and making sure that that's not going to be the case, but other large manufacturers have kind of disputed the reports and demanded that a list of these sources be given to them so that they could investigate the claims. Unfortunately, the poultry industry is just an example of the problem that meat consumption provides. And part of it is ecological, and that is basically that meat production and husbandry causes about half of emitted gases that are greenhouse gases, primarily methane. And that is quite significant. If we weren't to eat that much meat, that number would have shrunk. It would have been just as effective as dealing with some of the other sources, if not more. So that's one aspect of it. The human rights aspect is another, and then the animal rights aspect is a third. We've gotten to a place where the industry, the commercial husbandry has become the mainstay of meat production, and it's clear we're treating animal sentient beings as objects in order to satisfy the demand. And that has caused industry to overfeed animals, to treat them with cruelty, snip their tails without anesthesia in case of pigs and stuff, and remove beaks from chicken and so forth. And it has been quite the abusive track, and the use of hormones and genetic engineering to create plump chicken or other animals that can barely withstand their own weight just to improve production are examples of such horrific implications. Now, this been a movement that has surfaced called the flexitarian movement, and that's basically to compare to vegetarianism. This is flexitarianism, and basically it's less strict. It's not necessarily recommending abstaining from all meat. It's basically restricting the amount of meat intake, and that brings us to the fourth dimension of meat production, and that is that meat has been tied with a lot of illnesses. There's been research in China that spanned across a lot of locales, and the thing with China is that each tiny locale has a completely different diet, and they were able to track that and compare the health conditions of each canton and its diet. And there was a very significant correlation between animal product consumption and health. So basically, this new flexitarian recommendation, a journal called The Lancet has launched this project to come up with recommendations, and their focus was really the health aspect of it. But as they continued with the research, they wanted to see how it would impact the ecology, how it would impact global climate change, and the effect would have been significant if everyone had followed this diet. It's a moderate diet. It's for U.S. consumption, it would be quite a deviation because we consume a huge amount of meat compared to other countries. But there's countries in Africa, for example, that overeat starchy food, and this recommendation would affect them in a different way. But nevertheless, if you want to check out, the BBC has produced a little calculator that tells you how much effect do things that you eat have on your carbon footprint, which is interesting. Also, let me just state that I'm going to provide a lot of the links and a lot of the um, data that I'm mentioning on the show on the website that is progressiveupdate.com, and you're welcome to go there and look at those additional pieces of visual information or links that I cannot transfer to you via my voice. Next, I wanted to talk about Davos. It's been a little while since the last Davos Global Economic Forum conference, but I did want to touch up on something that happened at that event. And let me just state that I don't have any problem with powerful rich people coming together and attempting to solve the world's problems. I think that's not primarily who is supposed to be in charge of those problems. I think all of us have to have an input on those and on the solutions, and nobody has elected these individuals to do that. But I respect that they feel the need to do so. Some of them may not. Some of them are there for other reasons, but some of them I'm sure have sincere intent in participating in these discussions. However, there has been some discussion on taxes in the last conference. There were a few forums that, not a lot, very, very much on the margins, but there has been some discussion of taxes, and we're talking about marginal taxes, so taxes on wealthy income earners that exceed a certain amount, and that is basically following AOC's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's recommendation that a marginal tax, would be raised to 71% from its current low for any income above, I believe, above $10 million. And it's gotten a lot of critique in the United States. And when asked about it in one of the forums at Davos, Michael Dell, who is a philanthropist, has been asked whether he's in agreement with the raising of taxes or not, and he first stated that he would rather make his own decisions of where to spend his money and what to fund. And he did not trust what the government would do with such funds. But then he added that he did not believe that this would help the U.S. economy to grow. And the person who was interviewing him, the host, who was a Washington Post finance person, basically asked him to follow up on it, and he said, "Name one country where this has worked." And she was stumped by it, which is kind of surprising for the person that is covering economic news at the Washington Post. But she was a little stumped by it. She said her response was briefly in the 80s in the US. And one of the panelists immediately countered it and said, no, it's not that, it's the US. And you can listen to that clip online. I'll add the link. he explained that prior to that, during Eisenhower's time, the marginal tax bracket for any income a few $100,000 and up was 90%, not 71, 90%. And during that time, the US, of course, has seen quite a economic growth. So that puts to rest Michael Dell's assertion, and I think in great part the opposition in the United States that's balking at that notion that AOC would cause stagnation and destroy our economy if such a tax was reintroduced. That was an interesting kind of thing. Another thing is a video of Kamala Harris, and I know that she's running for president right now. She's running supposedly as a progressive. She's adopted the no PAC money, no large donation money model. However, she's done that in response after speaking with Wall Street and consulting with them whether she should run or not. So that tells you a little bit about where she is. But she has adopted the no big money donation platform, and she's selling herself as a progressive. But however, her past statements and so forth don't show that. She's briefly been in favor of the Medicare for All, then she backed up somewhat from it, and recently a video has surfaced of her telling the story of her going after parents of truant kids in schools. And she's kind of joking in that video in a smug kind of way that she's caused parents to fear that truancy of their kids and therefore increased school participation. And kind of to me that indicates a lack of understanding, if not a lack of compassion to these people. Parents of kids that are missing school are usually they're in positions that do not allow them to force the kids to go to school. They are often overworked or in poverty or in broken homes. And just to add this as a penalty, as a another thing to worry about in such a mix is just inhumane, in my opinion. Basically creates a worse situation, not a better situation. I don't think that can in any way improve things. And when you think about it, well, how does it even work? You put someone in jail for their kid missing school. How are their kids supposed to continue living, continue functioning if their parent is taken to jail? In many cases, those are single parent families, and in that one case that was reported, this was a woman that was put to jail for 180 days, a single mom. You can imagine how that improves their kids' performance in school. So, to me, that is quite a disappointing thing about Kamala. She strikes me as a very smart person, a very capable person, but not necessarily someone who understands the struggles of people, and particularly people in the working class. And I recommend that you watch that video and make your own conclusion. Another thing I wanted to mention is that it's often said that the coal industry is kind of crushing on its own, in spite of Trump's wish to revive it. The coal industry is basically dying because it's not profitable. And that is partially true. But I've done a little bit of digging on a website called opensecrets.org, which I recommend you use. It's a very interesting site to dig in, full of data, and you can find out details about politicians and about campaign finance that otherwise you wouldn't know, and that definitely colors and explains the position of many politicians and of industries. For example, the thing is, the coal industry has had a little bit of a setback with the advancement of fracking, which has kind of increased the production level and efficiency of producing oil and gas. As a result, it has suffered a little bit of a setback. But to understand the decline of the coal industry, one has to look at their campaign donations compared to the campaign donations by the oil and gas industry. So, all in all, lobbying between 1998 and 2018, you can see that the initial donation level of the coal companies was relatively low, but then it peaks towards 2018. From 2005 to 2008, there is a peak. It reaches a level of about $27 million lobbying money. At the same time, the oil and gas industry, they've also ramped it up. By 2008, it's become about 144 million compared to the 25 or 27 by the coal industry. And the year after that, we see the coal industry donation, 2009, shrunk to roughly 17 million. And the oil and industry donation money, almost rose to 180 million. And has kept almost at a similar level, under 144. It shrunk a little bit after that. It continued until this year at that level. The coal industry has declined because they could not keep up with that donation level. So what has happened in that time? There's been industry changes. There's been like research and development that China has actually been on the forefront of. Trying to improve the efficiency of liquefying coal, which is a technology that's been around for a long time, but they've improved that technology. In the US, in opposition, they've squelched government funding of these R&D projects, and we've backed away from improving the efficiency of coal production, coal generation of energy and for transportation purposes. Now, I'm not saying that coal should be used. I'm merely saying that there is more to it than just the laissez-faire idea that conservatives would like you to think fixes everything on its own. Obviously, there's been a lot of intervention, financial intervention by those industries, a lot of buying off of politicians to make that happen. So it's important to understand those trends. I'm going to post some of that also on this site, so you can review this data on your own. And that brings me to my last topic, and that is of O'Rourke. Again, a lot of people have considered him a progressive. He's claimed he would take no big money. Then he reverted. He took money from oil company executives. He then was confronted about it. And he said, well, it's perfectly fine to take money off of employees of companies, and it turned out that it wasn't just the employees of company; it was the leadership, the owners and executives. So, if you looked up his record in the last year, 2017 to 2018, there have been 5 top recipients of oil and gas industry donations. Ted Cruz was at the top with $617,000. Beto is the next one up though, at 484 and 85,000. After them are John Barrasso, Kevin Kramer, and Kevin McCarthy. One from Wyoming, one from Nevada, from California. Basically, all of them except for Beto are Republicans. Beto is the only Democrat that has been receiving that amount of donations. He's a number 2 recipient of donations from the oil and gas industry, and maybe that is expected of someone in Texas. However, that's not the image of a progressive who will have to be tasked with reducing carbon emissions in a Green New Deal. So to me, that on its face completely disqualifies him to run as a progressive. All right. Well, I covered a bunch of topics. I'd like to hear what you think or what you'd like me to cover in the future. You can send a Twitter message with the hashtag progressive update, and I will then respond to you or cover this on a future show. Hopefully in the future we'll also have some guests or special interviews. I hope to hear from you. Thank you and have a great day.